when you have a chronic illness, you sort of give up many people. Those are the people who are dying prematurely. And your friend is on the other side of the continuum there. And if you reduce the amount of mindfulness because you're depressed, you don't want to see anybody, you don't try anything new because after all, you're going to die, what happens is the system eventually turns itself off. That when you're mindful, the neurons are firing, and it's literally and figuratively enlivening, and the reverse for when you're excessively mindless. We take lots and lots of measures. At the very beginning, the two groups are the same. After the study, we find that neither group is eating more than the other. They're not exercising anymore. Nevertheless, we find the group that now changed their minds and see their work as exercise with nothing else changing. Lost weight. There was a change in waist to hip ratio, body mass index, and their blood pressure came down. There was a wonderful study that Frank Beach did in the 50s, I think. Takes a little boy rat, introduces a little girl rat, and they'll copulate until the boy rat can't take anymore. He needs a refractory period. Okay, unless right after the first little girl rat and he copulate, they immediately introduce a new little girl rat, change of context, and he doesn't need that refractory period.
Yeah.
There's so many people who contact me now when this book is out, and ask me things because they're in what they think are the last years of their lives, and they're depressed. And I say, I can't tell you how to feel. All I know is that I believe if someone told me I had 6 months to live, even though they shouldn't be telling people that, but if they did tell me that, I wouldn't waste a minute, I don't think, being depressed. I'd do as much living as I possibly could. Sure. And in that living, that means we're mindfully engaged in whatever we're doing, and that mindful engagement, as I've said already, we have many studies show that actually makes us healthier and live longer.
Dr. Ellen Langer, welcome to Your Health Matters. It's great to meet you. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is an honor for me. I have been so looking forward to talking with you because I've been, reading your book. Well, one of your books, you have several, The Mindful Body, which is a real game changer for me in so many different ways of how I perceive things, how I think about things. The whole idea of mindfulness, you being correct me if I'm wrong, the mother of mindfulness, do they say?
Yes.
That's what I thought, and that's rightly so. Been watching you and listening for a long time, so this is an honor. As we talk about mindfulness, you've really enlightened me on the idea of, oh my gosh, so many different things, like exploring the connection between our mindset and physical health. And maybe that's a good place to start. I'm in the brain health industry and also a movement disorder clinic that I run here and own in Syracuse. And, there's so much I believe can be done to help people think differently and maybe perceive differently and benefit themselves and possibly healing to some degree, if not a lot of degree themselves. Do you mind explaining about how being mindful of our thoughts and perceptions can directly influence our physical well-being?
Okay, well, Carl, we probably should start with what I mean by mindful, because when people hear the word, they tend to think of meditation, which is fine, but that's just something that's very different. Yeah. Meditation is a practice you engage in, hopefully to result in post-meditative mindfulness. Mindfulness, as we study it, is more direct. It's a very simple process of noticing. And you don't tend to notice because you think you know. So I often start these talks, lectures, podcasts, whatever. I've been doing so much talking lately, I don't even know to whom I've been speaking. But I'll ask people, how much is 1 + 1? And people, of course, quickly say, or they become afraid of me right from the start and don't say it, but they're thinking too. And it turns out that
would have been my answer if I hadn't heard this story already. So...
hopefully at some point the world will have heard it, but the point is, once they hear it, what are they doing with that information? So let me just tell people. So 1 + 1 is 2 if you're using a base 10 number system. But using a base 2 number system, 1 plus 1 is written as 10. But most people don't know anything about number systems. If you add one pile of laundry plus one pile of laundry, 1 plus 1 is 1. You add one cloud plus one cloud, 1 plus 1 is 1. Somebody sent me one the other day, which is fun. You take one pizza and you add one pizza, put it on top of it, you have 2 pizzas. But if you take one lasagna and you put on top of it and to it one lasagna, 1 plus 1 is 1. It's just a bigger lasagna.
Yeah.
At any rate, in the real world, 1 plus 1 probably doesn't equal 2 as more often as it does. Now, the point of this is that when you mindlessly, like a robot, believe 1 plus 1 is 2, that's the end, it's not interesting. But if someone were, Carl, after we finish speaking, very unlikely, but say, Carl, how much is 1 plus 1? Rather than blurt out 2, all of a sudden you have choices. At the least, you can say 1, 10, 2, 10, or 1. And so, when we're mindless, we're like robots and we don't have choices. And all of this stems from the mistaken belief that we know. Teachers teach us absolutes, parents, the media, and all of these absolutes are conditional. Science doesn't give us absolutes. Science gives us probablys. And those probablys are then translated into absolutes. So when you think you know, you don't pay any attention. When you know you don't know, you sit up and you... So a top-down way of becoming mindful is to accept that you don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody can know because everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. And so many of the things that we bought into because we were taught these absolutes, I've spent a whole career, it's over 45 years now, poking holes in the views. I was at a horse event, and this man asked me, could I watch his horse because he's going to get his horse a hot dog. Well, I'm Harvard, Yale all the way through. I know it's ridiculous. Horses are herbivorous. They don't eat meat.
Right.
Okay. Then he brings the hot dog to the horse, and the horse ate it. And that's when I realized everything I thought I knew could be wrong. And when we recognize that all we have are probabilities, and that with everything always changing, uncertainty is the rule, and what we have to do is learn how to exploit the power in uncertainty. So 2 ways of becoming mindful. One is top down, you just know you don't know, and then everything is new. Bottom up, take things you know, the person you live with, the job you're doing, and notice 3 new things about it. And then the next time, notice 3 new things, and so on. And as you notice new things, you say, I don't know this as well as I thought I did. It's very sweet. People say, be in the moment. And I laugh when they say that because everybody thinks they're in the moment. But when you're not there, you don't know you're not there. You're not there to know. And 45 years of research has shown me that virtually all of us, almost all the time, are simply not there. And being there is fun. It's if you're going to do something, I deeply believe you should show up for it, or why bother doing it?
Oh, absolutely. One of my
talk about.
Well, I tell you, so one of the things. Oh man, we could go. I could go for hours. Yeah, we'll go there. But let's talk about this for a minute. Just a comment, because you made this comment in your book, I believe, and in different interviews I've watched, and I feel the same. I've told people for the longest time, when I encounter something I didn't know that I could know, I actually feel really good. Whether it's good or bad, I feel good because I didn't know I could know this. This actually opens up a world of possibilities many times, and then I can start going down.
But Carl, as long as once you learn it, you don't think, now you've got it, because that, like 1 and 1 is 2, and everything else, horses don't eat meat, will vary depending on context.
Exactly. So we're using it a certain way, acting upon it, and exploring. I like to explore constantly. I love learning things I didn't know I could know. A lot of times it's just possibility. I'm curious.
Carl, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm excited.
Oh, it's fine. No, me too.
Now I forgot what I was going to say. Yes. You were talking about how you love to learn, and what people don't realize, because a lot of people who didn't do well in school, think that learning is what you do in school. without recognizing that any activity you're doing that's fun can only be fun if you're doing it mindfully. And to do it mindfully means you're noticing new things, hence you're learning. So learning itself is fun.
I love it. I just love it. So we're going to go to a break shortly, our first break. And today I have the honor of having with me Dr. Ellen Langer, author of many books, including her most recent, which is The Mindful Body, which I just love. You're listening to Your Health Matters here on the iHeart Network, and we'll be back shortly after this short break. All right, we're back with Dr. Ellen Langer. Dr. Langer, please enlighten us about mind-body. Let's talk about mind-body.
It's interesting, Carl. People don't realize that it was only a few decades ago that the medical world believed that thoughts, attitudes, that psychology in general was irrelevant to health and longevity. The only way you were going to get sick, they believed, was the introduction of an antigen. Now everybody knows that when situations are stressful, it's not good for you physically and so on. And so people started to talk now about the mind-body connection. And I think that that's almost as bad as not talking about the mind and body separately. And the reason for that is it sidesteps the question of, well, how are they connected? And so when I thought about this, mind, body, these are just words. Let's just put the two together and make it a single unit. And if you do that, even if you just do it for heuristic purposes, but I think it's better understood quite literally, you put the mind and body together as one, then wherever you're putting the mind, you're necessarily putting the body. Mm-hmm. And the understanding of that should occur to people is that, wow, since I can think all sorts of wonderful things, and that's going to affect my body in wonderful ways, why not at least give this a try? So we have lots of studies. The very first study on this is a famous study, and I can call it a famous study because if your listeners go to The Simpsons Go to Havana, they discuss the study. And if you're on The Simpsons, you know you've made it.
Okay.
The first study was very simple. We did a long time ago. We retrofitted a retreat to 20 years earlier and had elderly men live there for a week as if they were their younger selves. They talked about events that happened in the past as if they were just unfolding. Everything was as if now was then. As a result of this, in a very short time, less than a week, we found their vision improved, their hearing improved, their strength, their memory, and they looked noticeably younger. Not 20 years younger, but still younger. So that was very exciting. And then we've gone on to do many, many studies. I'll tell you about a couple of them.
Sure,
if
please.
People want the full range, they should take a look at the mindful body. The next one in this study, we take chambermaids. The chambermaids, everybody knows, are the women who clean hotel and motel rooms. First, we just ask them, how much exercise do you get? Now, these women are exercising all day long, but they think, according to the Surgeon General, exercise is what you do after work. Yep. So they think they're not getting any exercise. But they're
tired, right? So they don't want to go because they're tired.
If exercise is good for you, they should be healthier than similar others who are not, socioeconomically similar others who are not exercising. It turns out they're not. Okay, then we divide them randomly into two groups. Very simple. We teach one of the groups that their work is exercise. We say making a bed is like working on this machine at the gym. Cleaning the windows is like working on this other machine, and so. So now we have two groups. One group that knows their work is exercise, the other group that doesn't. We take lots and lots of measures. At the very beginning, the two groups are the same. After the study, we find that neither group is eating more than the other. They're not exercising anymore. Nevertheless, we find the group that now change their minds and see their work as exercise with nothing else changing. Lost weight. There was a change in waist-to-hip ratio, body mass index, and their blood pressure came down. The fun thing about this that people don't realize, most people know about the placebo. You take nothing, but you think it's something, and you get better. And that's actually probably the strongest early evidence for mind-body unity, because you're not doing anything but changing your minds. this is a study really on the nocebo effect, where you're doing something, the exercise in this case, but don't think it's anything, and it doesn't have the effect.
Right.
And it's very important for people to recognize that, you take a medication and the medication isn't working. What will probably happen is that the physician will increase the dosage. And if it's still acting as a nocebo because you don't think it's going to have any effect, even the stronger dosage isn't going to work. What we have to do is collaborate, at the least, in our own healthcare. Anyway, so we did another study. So I have so many, I don't know where to go next. All right, so we did a study. We had people in a sleep lab. They go to sleep, they wake up, and we've screwed around with the clock, unbeknownst to them. And they wake up and they see they got 2 hours more sleep than they got, 2 hours fewer, or the amount of sleep they actually got. Cognitive, physiological measures all follow perceived amount of sleep. We inflict a wound. It's a minor wound because I'm not a sadist. But, and even if I were, they rebuke, let me do the study. So we inflict a wound. And again, people individually, they're in front of a clock. Unbeknownst to them, the clock again is going half as fast, twice as fast, or real time. The wound heals based on perceived time, clock time. We have so many of these. We have studies with different diseases. And, let me tell you something. When we're talking about fatigue, because I asked my students, health class I teach at Harvard, I asked them, how far is it humanly possible to run? And they know a marathon. These are smart kids. They know a marathon is 26 inches, 26 miles. And they know it has to be more than that. So they start at 30. Somebody yells out 35. Somebody finally says 50. Most of the rest of the class groans. Then I turn around and I play a YouTube for them of the Tarahumara, which is a tribe in Copper Canyon, Mexico, that as a rule can run over 200 miles. And the reason I mention this is because the difference between what people think they can do and this 200 miles, I think approximates or not even approximates the differences between what we think we can do, what we do, and what in fact we would be able to do if we simply changed our minds.
I just love that. I love that. There's another one. I heard you talk about this with Jordan Peterson, I think. It had to do with you have a broken finger. You ask the doctor, how long does it take to heal? 7 days.
Yes.
Why 7 days? And do you mind talking about that just a little bit?
Sure. This was so many decades ago now. I was on the Committee of Aging at Harvard Medical School, and Jack Rowe was also on the committee. He chaired the committee.
Sure. Okay.
And Dr. Rowe. And so I called Jack one day. And I said, Jack, how long does it take for a broken finger to heal? He goes, I don't know, a week. I said, what would you say if I said I could heal it by psychological means in 5 days? He said, all right. I said, what about 4 days? He said, all right. I said, what about 3 days? He said, no. I said, what about 3 days and 23 hours? The point being, at what point, after that amount of time, it's okay, but right before it, it's not. To show that we have no way of knowing. And again, if we go back to the idea that research only gives us probabilities, whenever you're told how long something is going to take, it's always a guess. Some people will be more, some people less, but we too often make it a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Amazing. There's such power in this. In fact, I can't even imagine how much power there really is in all this and how, if it's even measurable. But with that in mind, let's go to a break. Everybody listening, thank you for listening. We really appreciate you tuning into the show. We're talking with Dr. Ellen Langer. She's at Harvard, and she has a bunch of books, most recent being The Mindful Body. I highly recommend get online, find it, and buy it, because it's changed how I think about things, and it'll change how you think too. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're talking with Dr. Ellen Langer about The Mindful Body. That's the title of her book. I love how you distinguished mindfulness from meditation, because that's what I thought it was when I first, before I encountered you and learned from you. But I have a question here. So how many times do we know of people, and I'll just give you two real quick examples. There's a gentleman I knew 20-something years ago He was given 6 weeks to live, 6 months to live. He died in 6 weeks. There's another person I know who's still alive. 18 years ago, she was given 1 year to live because of some type of ovarian cancer, I believe. And, she's like, well, the hell with that. I'm not going to die. And she's still alive. And she's had her challenges along the way, but there seems to be power in the belief of what we're told about what to expect maybe in our health or other things. Can you share about this?
Sure. I have so much to say. Let me see if I can get it all in this short period of time. So when people are given a diagnosis of a chronic illness, most people understand chronic to mean there's nothing you can do about it. And that the symptoms are going to stay the same or just get worse. Well, it turns out what chronic means is just that the medical world doesn't know what to do about it at this point in time. And there are always things that we can do. So if we go back to my earliest research, we make people, we give people experience with being more mindful, they live longer, they become healthier, happier, and so on. It's also the case that when you have a chronic illness, you sort of give up many people. Those are the people who are dying prematurely. And your friend is on the other side of the continuum there. And if you reduce the amount of mindfulness because you're depressed, you don't want to see anybody, you don't try anything new because after all, you're going to die, what happens is the system eventually turns itself off. That when you're mindful, the neurons are firing, and it's literally and figuratively enlivening, and the reverse for when you're excessively mindless. We did this interesting thing where I was trying to come up with some way of helping people with chronic illnesses that they can do for themselves. I'll explain it to you, and it'll take a moment after that to show you how you do this for yourself. But nobody's symptoms stay the same. Nothing ever stays the same. The stock market is going up. It doesn't go up in a straight line. It goes up and then it goes down a tiny bit. And so too with whatever symptoms we're experiencing. So I'm going to call you periodically and I'm going to ask you, so how is the symptom now? And you're going to see that, gee, there are times you're actually better. Well, that in itself feels good. Then I'm going to ask you, well, why is it better now? What makes this different from the last time we spoke? And to answer that question, you start doing a mindful search. And that mindfulness, again, is good for you, even if you don't come up with anything. Third, that once you start, if you believe that there's a solution, you're more likely, I believe, to find the solution. Now, what we did was we would call people who have all sorts of disorders. So let me give you some of these: Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, chronic pain, arthritis, a list of biggies. And in each case, by doing this, we virtually eliminate the problem. Now, this was my replacement for a placebo, because you can't take placebos are so strong. Now, almost every disease, you take the placebo thinking it's real medication and you get better, but you can't give yourself a placebo because it's nothing.
Yeah, right.
So with this, if everybody's got a smartphone, set the smartphone to ring in an hour. And when it rings, ask yourself, so how is the symptom? Is it better or worse than the last time? And why? And then set it to ring, 2 hours from now. And just keep varying that. And the interesting thing about this is much of the time when you're dealing with medical issues, there are very severe side effects. And there are no negative side effects here. You feel better just because you're doing something, and it doesn't have to be in place of medical care. It can be along with whatever medical care. And let me go back for a moment. That I said that there are always things we can do. Well, from labs other than labs, this is sort of amazing, hard to believe, but it's out there. That if you engage in imagined exercise, the effects are virtually the same as real exercise. That's how powerful our minds are. So now you're not depressed because you're doing something for yourself. You're being more mindful, so you're still living rather than setting the stage for your own demise. And you very well may, as we found, find a solution to this. So Carl, so let's say you think you're stressed all the time. No one is anything all the time. All right. So I call you periodically, and how is it now? Is it better or worse than the last time? And why? And we go through this. And then you discover, you're maximally stressed when you're talking to Ellen Langer. So the solution is easy, right? Don't talk to me.
Don't talk to me.
Or find a different way of talking. But that was very exciting, that whole program of research that we were in.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I'm going to shamefully now admit my anxiety and stress sometimes just seems to get out of hand, especially when it comes to travel. I love planes. I love to fly. I just don't like airports, people, and missed connections, and I have no control over it. What can I do? But I feel like I'm giving power over to something that doesn't know it has power over me, and that's just ridiculous.
Well, yeah.
So,
okay, so
I
Carl,
feel like fatigue has to be a state of mind more than an actual thing.
Oh, you want to? Okay, I was going to talk about stress, but we can start.
Please. Oh, it's the same thing. It's maybe not the same thing, but it feels the same to me. But please go there. Yeah.
All right. Stress is not a function of events. Stress is a function of the views we take of events. If you open up your minds and see many different possibilities, you immediately become less stressed. It could be this, could be that, rather than it's definitely going to be awful. I think I have several one-liners that even if people don't have a chance to digest anything that we're talking about, take this away with you, which is that ask yourself next time you're stressed, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? And almost always you recognize, so I missed the appointment, I screwed up the project, I banged the car. These are not tragedies, and you immediately feel better. And then one should realize that almost always the things we're worried about happening never happen. So one thing that people might do when they're stressed, stress requires two things. First, it requires a belief that something's going to happen. And second, that when it happens, it's going to be awful. So we can approach both of those. The first, that something is going to happen. Give yourself 5 reasons. If you're really creative, 10 reasons. If you're not so creative, 3 reasons. Doesn't matter. Why it won't happen. So you started off thinking it's definitely going to happen, and maybe it won't happen. All right. Now, so you immediately feel better, right? Because the maybe it won't is a nicer feeling. Now ask yourself, I make believe it does happen. How is that actually a good thing? And whether something is good or bad, again, is not in the event. It's the way we understand it.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And before we go to a break, because we need to do that in a second, I'm just going to go back to one thing about the exercise and versus actual exercises versus thinking about it. I'm going to tell you, in my former career as a drummer, okay, that's what I did. That was my thing for decades. And I just got burned out. But I hated practicing. It was such an inconvenience. The one thing I used to do is literally 95% of my practicing is right up here, and I work it all out in my head, and then I could sit down and usually play it pretty well. So that was a learning curve for me, which I need to, or a learning event for me, or a skill I need to transfer to other aspects of my life. We're talking with Dr. Ellen Langer. This is Your Health Matters. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and we're with Dr. Ellen Langer of Harvard. We're talking about the mindful body. We're talking about all things mindfulness. This is just probably my favorite discussion I've ever had. I love it. So let's talk about, if you don't mind, fatigue. Let's talk about fatigue.
So now if we go back to the original supposition that mind and body are best conceived of as a single unit. If it's one thing, wherever you put the mind, you're going to put the body. And so then what follows from that is that fatigue is largely a mindset. I think the way to picture this is, you have somebody who's word processing all day long on the computer, and their shoulders hurt and their neck hurts, and they just want to get out of there. And then they go home and then they play the piano. So it's the same movement, but the context is different. There was a wonderful study that Frank Beach did in the 50s, I think. Takes a little boy rat, introduces a little girl rat, and they'll copulate until the boy rat can't take anymore. He needs a refractory period. Okay, unless right after the first little girl rat and he copulate, they immediately introduce a new little girl rat, change of context, and he doesn't need that refractory period. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of research, we don't have time for it, that I talk about in the mindful body, I think that helps support the idea that it's largely just a mental construct.
Wow. Interesting. My gosh. So let's see, what road are we going now next to? We were going to talk about longevity.
Longevity.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, to me, it's very interesting that in today's world, because there are so many of us seniors, so many baby boomers, that people seem almost obsessed with tell me ways of living longer. So people are doing more exercise, and that's good for them. They're eating better and doing whatever they think is going to lead them to live longer. If they're doing those things and they're enjoying themselves, that's fine. Otherwise, I think that they're not spending their time as well as they might. Where I'm going to end up with this, I'll give you the bottom line up front, which is rather than be obsessed with living longer, adding more years to your life, what we need to do is add more life to our years. And the only way we can do that is by being mindful. And it's interesting. I was going to write a book about 40 years ago that was asking the question, is there life before death? Since people were questioning whether there was life after them. And most people are sealed in unlived lives, and they're oblivious to it. And, you have a heart attack, or you find out you have some dread disease. And for a lot of people, that's when they finally come alive. And the sad thing about that is that this mindfulness is easy. It's energy beginning. It's what you're doing when you're having fun. So all people need to do is put the stress aside, find ways of enjoying what they're doing, give up some of the judgments and valuations that keep us locked up, afraid to speak, as fear that somebody is going to belittle us, and so on. And I'll tell you, it's interesting to me, Carl, I've been doing this for many, many decades, many, many years, 4 decades and more. And lots of findings that are very exciting. We've talked about a lot of them. We make people more mindful and they live longer. These are big things. But one thing I came to after all of these years that to me was more important than everything else, and that oddly, or not so oddly, would, I think, extend life if people accept it, which is to recognize that behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or else the actor wouldn't do it. What that means, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm going to be obnoxious, aggressive, and clumsy. Right? So when we see people like this, so we're like this, what's actually going on? And what happens is we don't pay attention to the difference between our perspective as the actor or an observer's perspective. Those are collapsed. The observer doesn't know why we're doing what we're doing, but could know. Let me cut to the chase to make this easier to understand. So let's say to you, let me tell you that I am very gullible. I mark the edge of the gullible continuum. I'm quite sure of that. I was taken by 2 psychopaths. I don't brag about it, but it's true. So then help me not be gullible, and you'll show me, look at this. I agree with you, and I'll try to change, but I won't be able to. Because going forward, my intention is not to be gullible. Going forward, my intention is to be trusting. And the only way I'm not going to be gullible is if I stop valuing being trusting. You, on the other hand, I know this from our short time together, are so inconsistent it defies belief. Now, I can help you become less inconsistent, all right? Look at it and you agree and just, you hate yourself for it, or you can't bear the people you know who are inconsistent. From the perspective that I'm speaking of now, what you need to realize is you value being flexible. And as long as you're flexible, there are times you're going to seem inconsistent. So the point is, each and every behavior in which we engage has a positive explanation. And that when we're aware of that, then if I want to change you, or you want to change me, or we want to change ourselves, we don't change you being inconsistent or me being gullible. We have to get me not to value being trusting. But I think then the better thing would be for you to start to value my being trusting and my valuing your being flexible, which often plays as inconsistent. So we did this study. We give people 200 of these behavior descriptions. all the negative ones are frustrating. Check those things that you keep trying to change about yourself and you keep failing. So for me, being gullible, being impulsive, doesn't matter what the rest are. Now you turn the page over, and in a mixed up order are the positive versions of these. Now the question is, check those things that you really value about yourself. And for me, it's being spontaneous and trusting. Okay, so the point is that once we understand this, that behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or the actor wouldn't do it, we stop being judgmental. We stop taking ourselves apart. Then life becomes easier. That sets us up with better relationships so that we're more likely to engage in interpersonal mindfulness. And that mindfulness is the energizer that I think is best to result in longevity.
I would like to share with you something I'm consistent at, and it's being inconsistent. I'm consistently inconsistent. This is the truth. And you know what? You nailed it. I love flexibility. I need flexibility. I need to bob and weave for a lot of different reasons. I'm not even sure I know all the reasons, but wow, this is really fascinating. So we got a couple minutes left in this last segment. What I want to tell listeners is right now, we're going to go into a short overtime with Dr. Langer. And the way you can hear that is to go to carlsterling.net. That's Carl with a K. That'll take you right over to the place where the overtime is available in this interview, right? So for listeners who are just going to finish up here with this hour and they can't tune in overtime at this moment, Dr. Langer, do you have any particular special takeaway message for them?
I think that there's nothing that is better for us physically, psychologically, than becoming more mindful. And that once we recognize how easy it is, and it's the essence of what we're doing when we're having fun, that nothing should stop people from moving in this direction. So anytime you're unhappy, what you need to do is recognize the event's not making you unhappy. It's your view of the event. The more mindful, the more options, the more ways we have of looking at things. It's just a simple act of noticing. Now, I said the top-down way of becoming more mindful is appreciating uncertainty. So people need to understand that right now, rather than make a personal attribution for uncertainty, I don't know, but it's knowable, therefore I'll pretend or whatever, make a universal attribution. I don't know, you don't, nobody knows. We can't know. And that's very exciting because that makes everything new, and that makes us brand new.
I love that. I love it. Well, thank you for joining us so much, Dr. Langer. I appreciate it. Be sure to go out, buy her book called The Mindful Body by Dr. Ellen Langer. And we're going to overtime in a minute, folks. Go to carlsterling.net. That's Carl with a K, carlsterling.net. You can look for this episode there and check it out. And you're listening to Your Health Matters here on the iHeart Network. Appreciate you tuning in. Have a fantastic day. All right, friends, we're with Dr. Ellen Langer, and we're in the overtime portion of the show here. I like the overtimes a lot because we can get to a little information that we didn't get to during the aired portion of the show. Dr. Langer, do you mind? I just really want to hear this story from you about pancreas. And I know you have a couple pancreas stories, but I love the one about your honey.
No. I won't tell them. I'll tell them.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. And steal my thunder, you invite me to tell us.
Yeah, right here, sit, please.
Here we go. Well, so it's interesting because the mindful body, thinking our way to chronic health, was first to be a memoir. So I have lots of personal stories in there. And this is one I tell early on. There are two things that happen that sowed the seeds for my eventually developing the mind-body unity work. I was married when I was obscenely young. Don't tell anybody. And I was 19 going on 40. And we went to Paris on our honeymoon. And we go to this restaurant and I order a mixed grill. And one of the items on the mixed grill was pancreas. And so I asked my then husband, who was more worldly than I at the time, which of these is the pancreas? He points to something. I'm a big eater. I eat everything else with gusto. Now comes the moment of truth. Can I eat the pancreas? I still, to this day, can't figure out why I thought because I was married meant that I had to be willing to eat pancreas. But nevertheless, that was it. So I start eating it, and I start getting sick, literally. And he starts laughing, which for newlyweds was not appropriate. And I say to him, why are you laughing? And he said, because that's chicken. You ate the pancreas a long time ago. All right, so here I had literally made myself sick. Then the other pancreas story that I talk about in the book, my mother had breast cancer that had metastasized to her pancreas. And as you know, that's the end game. Mm-hmm. And then magically it was gone. And the medical world couldn't explain it. And so here we have a situation where my mind helped me make myself sick. Somehow she made herself well. And that was the beginning, implicitly, of the mind-body unity work. In fact, it's interesting to think about it because everybody knows somebody where there's been, or I don't know if they know somebody, but has heard at least of spontaneous remissions. But people think that they're rare. And I don't think they're nearly as rare as people think they are. You know, that if you tend not to go to the hospital, and you live someplace where getting to a hospital is, it's too far away, or you have medical fear, there are many of these people who have tumors, not even know they have tumors, and then the tumors are gone. We don't know how many of these people are out there. And so that again speaks to how unpredictable everything is. And so when the medical world gives you diagnoses and prognoses, we need to accept that information with a grain of salt. They cannot know you have, let's say, six months to live. There's no way they can know that. Mm-hmm. But if you believe it, it's more likely to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So there are some people for whom they have the diagnosis. My mother, there was this woman who just wandered around the hospital doing good things, and she went to see my mother, and she knew my mother's supposed to die any minute. And the woman said, Sylvia, my mother's name, they told me I had 6 months to live, years ago. I went ahead and then spent all my money, and I'm still alive. So, and in this, we all know people who, as you mentioned before, people whose lives took a turn very different from what was predicted for them.
I find it amazing. Yeah, I find it amazing. So, I think about in my clinic here, if the work I'm known for, and I'm not trying to toot my horn, I've traveled all over the world and taught and whatever. Okay, I'm tooting my horn. So I wrote 2 books, and I've taught in 30-something countries this neuro rehabilitation, Parkinson's, a lot of it's Parkinson's. And how that happens is a story in itself, and it doesn't really matter. But the people who I've met who seem to be doing the best and the most functional and feeling the best, and their attitude is just really great, the people who feel that they're not defined by their diagnosis and that it will not restrict them. They're just going to do the stuff. They keep moving. They don't let it be a sentence or a prison, like, okay, now I can't do this anymore. They're going out. They're actually doing more now, a lot of them. In fact, some of them come and they co-teach with me. I want real life people there to be an example for, I believe I can do anything. Yeah.
There's so many people who contact me now when this book is out, and ask me things because they're in what they think are the last years of their lives, and they're depressed. And I say, I can't tell you how to feel. All I know is that I believe if someone told me I had 6 months to live, even though they shouldn't be telling people that, but if they did tell me that, I wouldn't waste a minute, I don't think, being depressed. I'd do as much living as I possibly could. Sure. And in that living, that means we're mindfully engaged in whatever we're doing, and that mindful engagement, as I've said already, we have many studies show that actually makes us healthier and live longer.
Yeah. And there's a whole bunch I could say about that. But to cut to that chase real quick, is there are certain things we've implemented in the workshops that will have brought some people. I'll just tell you one story real quick. This lady didn't think she'd be able to roll over because she can never roll over in bed. So the first workout we did was the floor is our friend. This is down in Monterrey, Mexico. And I look over in the corner and I see her there. And we were teaching people how to roll over, how to use their body and leverage it. And everybody was able to roll over, including the ones who didn't think they'd ever be able to. This is not rocket science. Okay, this is like, we're going to use the body in a way we didn't realize we could use it or should use it. So I look over, she's crying. I go, está, okay, está bien, sí, señor, gracias. Well, that was the first time she rolled over on her own with no assistance in 5 years. So where I'm going with this is the power of hope and belief, because what happened then was she went from like this in the workshop with her arms crossed and feeling completely defeated and like this is the end, to hopeful. She was hopeless and defeated, and she's unstoppable. To this day, 6 years later, she's out there, now she's running marathons again. And she's rolling over, she's doing it. But I didn't do anything. I just showed her how to roll over. That gave her, isn't that powerful?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I have so many things to say about that. The first you're not going to like is that, well, certainly having hope is better than being hopeless. There's a better way. I spent a lot of time in the book with strange little words that we use that give our psychology away. When I go down in the morning to get coffee, I don't hope there's going to be coffee there. Hope has built into it an expectation for failure, and all too often we get what we expect. So I think that people need to understand there is no way to provide evidence, science certainly can, to say you can't. All science can suggest is that what you tried didn't work. Now, corollary to this is that people think they want complete success, but you can either do things perfectly mindlessly or imperfectly mindlessly. And so it's the struggle in some sense that makes it all fun. So an example I'm fond of using, you're a little kid and you get in that elevator, you're trying to press the button, but you're not tall enough. And the adult picks you up and you press it. And the next time you go, you try. And, this happens over and over, and it's great fun for the child who still can't press the button. Then at some point, the child is tall enough, presses the button. You tell me the last time you were excited when you were in an elevator that you could press the button. All right. So once you can do it with 100% success, it's no longer gives you anything.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? That totally makes sense. Of course, now I have grandchildren. They want to press the button, so that becomes a new fun for me. Right? But
another example that if people can identify with that, say you're a golfer and people think, wouldn't it be wonderful if I were able to get a hole-in-one on every shot? Well, if so, then there'd be no game there.
Yeah.
So we have to reorient ourselves rather than run away from what we see as failure and then think of it as long-lasting and whatever. It provides an opportunity to learn more, to do more, to continue enjoying whatever the activity is.
Is any part of this at all driven by the dopamine factor and the
Sure. So people often, when I give these talks to neuroscience types, and they say, "What's going on under the hood? I mean, what's going on in the head and the body?"
Sure.
And I, clearly there are things going on. What I'm suggesting is that all of these things that are happening more or less simultaneously, rather than sequentially. So if I raise my hand, my brain is now different from before I raised my hand. Everything is going to be different. And so it's not, a behavioral response is not better or worse than a physiological understanding of something. You can intervene on many levels. So, of course, that if it's been found, which it has, that when one is excited, there's a release of endorphins, then we can assume, I haven't done this, but I'd be shocked if it didn't work, that the more mindful you are, the more the endorphins are flowing, because you can't enjoy yourself mindlessly. And just think of it. If you were a robot, is that robot having a grand time? No. The robot's just doing whatever the robot does.
That's a good point.
Why would anybody want to live, sleepwalk through their lives? once they see how easy it is to turn everything around.
You have some of the best descriptions. I just love it. Why would anyone want to sleepwalk through their lives? I have a little saying, I didn't make it up, as most people tiptoe through life hoping to make it safely to death. And once I heard that one years ago.
That's terrible.
Yeah,
well, it's terrible that people are doing that. At first I heard it as a recommendation for people,
No, this is a thing not to do.
This is a thing run and
this is not a thing we want to do, and I've actually talked about it on air before. Why do we do this? A lot of us, and I'm no psychologist or anything, but the fact that I've done it myself and now I'm branching out, I feel like once I hit the age of 51, everything changed. Don't know why. It's just a magical year. Maybe it's because I went back to school, back to college. But no, maybe I'll do it again. Who knows?
Good. I think people need to live large, and and recognize that the things they're afraid of, if they looked at them closely, they'd see there was nothing to be afraid of. I do an activity with my students. I say, don't come to class next week unless you're wearing 2 different shoes.
Sure.
And I think it's not just for young people. If I took a bunch of 50-year-olds, they would be very hesitant. I'm not talking about heels and a sneaker, so you're going to be running the risk of falling. But just 2 different shoes. They're afraid. Everybody's going to be looking at them. People are going to be laughing, judging, and so on. And what these students see that come to class, nobody even noticed. And then if somebody notices, if it's somebody you've never seen, you're probably never going to see them again. So what's the difference? And if it's somebody they know typically you wear, the same shoes. So I've been doing this for so many years. So a few years ago, this one student, a wonderful young woman, she says, Professor Lange, you won't believe what happened. I said, what? She says, okay, get in the elevator, and I have 2 different shoes on. And there's a guy there, another student. And he looks down at my feet, and he looks at my face. And he looks down at my feet, and he looks at my face. Then he points to my shoes. He says, was that intentional? You know what I did? I said, no, what did you do? She said, I looked at his shoes. I looked at his face. I looked at his shoes. I looked at his face, and I looked at his shoes and said, was that intentional? Who decided that socks have match?
I want to try this now.
People need to understand that everything that we lock ourselves into was at one point just a decision made by other people. These things aren't handed down from the heavens that say your socks must match, your shoes must match. And yet we lock ourselves in for fear of being negatively evaluated. And, if you stand tall, if you recognize that the winning approach, I believe, to life is to be confident but uncertain, because you can't know, but nobody knows, so why not be confident? And you stand tall, people start off respecting you. The cue you're giving them is that you're somebody who deserves respect, as all of us do, but not all of us.
You make everything just so fun to have a conversation. I'm thinking about things I do on a daily basis that can become more fun instead of not fun, because it really becomes a choice.
Well, I think everything should be fun. So I played this video for my students. It's called Piano Stairs. If you've never seen it, you should see it. All over the world, subway stations are pretty much the same. When you're down at the train, and then you have an escalator or stairs. And almost everybody takes the escalator. So these smart people in Scandinavia, I believe it was, laid down pianos, notes, on the stairs. So you wind up, it's actually making noise.
It is making noise.
In almost no time, people give up the escalator and now are taking the stairs, having fun. But the message that I give my students is very different, which is that why wait for somebody else to make this fun for you? You can do your way up the stairs anyway. What we have this notion that there are things where we're at play or we're at work. Work is necessarily stressful, and I don't buy any of that. I don't think that work should be stressful. I don't think we want to distinguish between who we are at work, who we are at life. I think we want to be basically the same person wherever we are, standing tall, knowing that we don't know.
You know, that's interesting. And I was on a stairway that had stairs in Mexico sometime in the past year. There have been 5 trips there. I don't know what city, but a museum. And there was an escalator option or a stair option. And I chose the stairs with the people I was with because I wanted to see what would happen. As you pass by the lasers, it makes the note of, right? So
Oh, okay, yeah.
that was, and so everyone's taking the stairs because it became like this fun thing to do.
But everything should be fun.
Yeah, I see. I love this. Well, I've got to make some changes around my clinic and make it more engaging. We do a lot of gamification here, so people are engaged. Or you just gave me a whole bunch of ideas without even giving me the ideas, really, the concepts, though. Well, Dr. Langer, it has been such a great honor and pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for all of your time and the extra time. I just love what you do. You're amazing.
My pleasure, Carl. Thank you.
You taught me so much. And I want to thank all the listeners for tuning in and listening and to make this show stay at the top of the charts. We're grateful for that. We just want to bring really good world-class guests, great world-class guests, to the show to educate us, to help us live better and feel better and have I like your more life in your years.
Add more life to your years, and that should result in more years to your life.
You got it. All right. Thank you again, my friend. It's great to meet you, and we'll be in touch, okay?
Okay, wonderful. Be well.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye now.